All right, so get this. Canada, a country known for being so welcoming to immigrants. Well, they just slammed on the brakes, basically. We're talking a major cut to how many immigrants they want to let in. It's like aiming for zero population growth almost. So what's the deal here?
Yeah.
I mean, you might remember Canada actually really boosted immigration after the pandemic ended. So this is a pretty wild U-turn. Kind of confusing, right? We're going to take a deep dive into this whole policy shift, and we'll be using a CBC News video as our guide.
Yeah, it is a head scratcher. Canada's always been the poster child for being, open to immigration around the world. So this has got people talking for sure.
Right. So the video, right off the bat, it starts with the Prime Minister, right? He's explaining why they hit the brakes so hard. And he basically says the government needs a timeout. A timeout to catch up on stuff like housing, healthcare, social services, all those things a growing population needs, right?
Yeah, and what's really interesting about that is that it really points to this kind of disconnect. The government is basically saying, hold up. Our systems just can't handle this speed of growth.
And they're not kidding about that growth. Canada's population, it just ballooned, right? Over 1 million people in just 2 years. And most of that driven by immigration, triple what they thought it would be. It's like they opened the floodgates and forgot to build a dam. You know what I mean?
The video actually uses that analogy, a runaway train, which I think really captures that feeling that things are getting out of control. And a big chunk of that surge, was from temporary residents, like international students and temporary workers. I mean, they're supposed to come in and fill those worker shortages, but the numbers, they just exploded way more than anyone expected.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. The whole temporary resident thing, I get that they were, brought in to fill those worker gaps, but how did it get so out of hand?
Well, I think one factor is that the Canadian economy, it bounced back after the pandemic way faster than anyone thought it would. So that meant that, the need for workers, it was still really high. And then on top of that, you got other countries, right? They're all competing for global talent. So Canada had to up its game to attract those workers.
Yeah, so it sounds like a whole bunch of things happened at once and created this perfect storm. But how does that connect back to the government's choice to slash immigration?
Well, that surge in temporary residents, it just put this added pressure on these systems that were already struggling to keep up with the growth in permanent residents. And housing, that's a perfect example.
Yeah, the housing situation in Canada, it's no secret, right? Prices have been going through the roof for years. And this recent population boom, it's like they just poured gasoline on the fire.
Totally. And the video highlights this pretty bleak statistic. Canada is only building one new home for every 4 new working age people. So simple math, right? That's going to lead to a huge shortage.
Now we're talking massive price jumps, right? The average home price went up almost $300,000 in just 2 years. And rents are insane too, record highs. It's making life so hard for everyone, especially newcomers, people who are just trying to get settled. Imagine you arrive in a new country, you're full of hope, and then boom, you can't even find a decent place to live.
Yeah, it's a tough reality check for sure. And while those high interest rates and the cost of building, that's a factor, right? You can't deny that all this fast population growth has made things so much worse. Even if the growth slows down a bit, Canada could be, get this, 5 million housing units short by 2030.
5 million, that's crazy. The video really zooms in on this lack of housing units overall, but it doesn't really get into the types of housing being built. Are we building enough affordable places for newcomers, or are we just focused on, those fancy condos that most people can't afford? That's something to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. The type of housing, that matters just as much as how many units there are. If we're not building housing that people actually need, like newcomers and families that don't have a lot of money, then are we really solving the problem? I don't think so.
Okay, so housing is one piece of the puzzle, but what about healthcare? Canada's healthcare system, it was already facing some tough times, even before all this population growth, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got an aging population, right? Which
Yeah.
means more and more people need healthcare. And then on top of that, we don't have enough healthcare workers. And burnout, that's a huge problem. So all this new population growth, it's basically pushed a system that was already strained, right, to its breaking point.
The video actually gives some scary numbers. The number of Canadians who don't have a family doctor has jumped by 2 million. That's forcing people to go to those emergency rooms, which are already packed.
And here's the crazy part, right? Newcomers, who we often think of as helping our workforce, they're the ones having the hardest time getting healthcare. That's like a vicious cycle.
it's almost like the very people they brought in to help are now becoming part of the problem.
Yeah, it's a messy situation. Lots of layers to it.
And it goes beyond just housing and healthcare, too.
Yeah.
The video brings up Prince Edward Island as an example, where a massive influx of immigrants just totally overwhelmed their power grid. So it's not just those two things, housing and healthcare, that are feeling the strain.
Exactly. When you have fast population growth, it puts pressure on everything. Infrastructure, services, you nailed it. Transportation, education, even waste management and social services, they all feel it. It takes time, right? And resources to adapt and make those systems bigger so they can handle more people.
So we've talked about housing, healthcare, and all that infrastructure stuff. Now let's get to the big issue everyone's thinking about. The political stuff. Public support for immigration in Canada, it's been going down. So what's behind that?
Well, the video touches on that, and they mentioned this survey that found about half of Canadians now think immigration is actually a bad thing. And their biggest worries, you guessed it, housing, healthcare, and too much competition for resources.
I mean, I get it. People are worried when they feel like they're not getting their basic needs met. But is it fair to blame all that on immigrants?
It's tough to say. It's complicated. Immigration, it might be a factor in how strained some systems are, but these problems, these are often systemic issues. They were there way before all these newcomers arrived.
So then what's the answer? Is slashing immigration really going to fix things? The video actually mentions that immigration helped Canada avoid a recession. So what happens to the economy if we just suddenly cut off all that talent and all those workers?
That's a good question. I mean, immigrants, they often fill those crucial jobs, They bring new skills, new ideas, and they help with innovation and starting businesses. If we reduce immigration, it could have some bad side effects on the economy. It could slow down growth and make it harder for businesses to find the people they need to do the work.
It's almost like a ripple effect, right? One change in one area can trigger all these other changes across different sectors.
Totally. And that's why it's super important to think about what these decisions will mean in the long run, right? It's not just about putting out fires today. It's about being smart and planning for the challenges that are coming down the road.
Okay, so we've kind of uncovered some of the why behind this whole immigration U-turn, but it feels like we're just, scratching the surface of something much bigger, right? What are your thoughts so far? What really sticks out to you as we kind of pause here?
What I find really interesting is how big of a role those temporary residents played in all of this. It seems like the government just wasn't ready for how many of them came in, and that's just made a tough situation even tougher.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like a key piece of the puzzle that needs a closer look, right? And we're going to do that. We'll dive deeper into what this all means in the long run and maybe look at some different solutions in the next part of our deep dive. So stay tuned. What's interesting? This whole thing, it makes me think about like a scarcity mindset, The video talks about how when they feel like things are running out, things like housing, healthcare, even like a sense of community, it can make them afraid. And it can make them kind of resent newcomers. You know what I mean? It's like something that makes itself true,
Yeah, that's a good point. And it shows how important it is for the people in charge, the policymakers, to, talk to people, explain things. If people feel like nobody's listening to their worries or that they're losing out, it can create a lot of negativity, a lot of distrust.
And the video, it also points out how the government, by, deciding to just cut immigration so much, it could be like a way to make voters happy, to gain back their trust. But is it really fixing the actual problems, the root of the problems?
Right, that's the big question, isn't it? It's like slapping a Band-Aid on a broken leg. Yeah, it might stop the bleeding for a little bit, but it's not going to fix the bone. Is slowing down immigration really going to give the government the time it needs to catch up and fix these like system-wide problems?
And then there's the economy, right? We can't forget that. The video said immigration actually helped Canada avoid a recession. So what happens if you just suddenly cut off that flow of new talent, new workers?
That's a real worry. Immigrants, they often fill those jobs nobody else wants to do, And they bring new skills, new ways of looking at things. They help create new things, start new businesses. If we cut back on immigration too much, it could backfire, right? The economy could actually slow down, and businesses might have a hard time finding workers.
It's kind of like a ripple effect, You make one change in one place, and it causes all these other changes in different areas.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to think about the long game. Think about what will happen years down the road. It's not just about solving the problems we have right now. It's about being smart and getting ready for what might be coming next.
So if cutting immigration isn't the magic solution, then what is? What could Canada have done differently to handle all these new people coming in?
Well, one thing that really comes out of this video is how important planning is, thinking ahead. Seems like those policymakers, they weren't really ready for all those temporary residents. They should have had, better ways to predict how many immigrants were coming, across all categories, not just permanent residents. That would have been a good place to start.
That makes sense. If you don't know how many people are coming, it's like planning a party and not knowing how many guests to expect.
Yeah.
You might not have enough food or even enough chairs for everyone.
Right. And then there's the whole investment thing. If you're going to welcome a lot of newcomers, you got to put money into the things they'll need. That means building more houses that people can afford, expanding healthcare so it can handle more people, and making sure all those essential services, the infrastructure, can handle the extra demand.
So it's not just about controlling how many people come in. It's about making sure they have what they need to do well once they get here.
Exactly. And that takes a team effort, right? All levels of government working together. And then working with businesses and community groups too. Been a big job. But it's really important if you want to have an immigration system that works well and is sustainable, lasts for a long time.
The video also mentioned that even before this big jump in immigration, those public services like healthcare were already struggling.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's where the conversation needs to go beyond just immigration. Canada, it's like a lot of developed countries. They're dealing with an older population, more and more older people, which means they need more healthcare. So that demand's going up no matter what happens with immigration.
So even if immigration stayed low, these problems, they'd still be there, simmering away.
Probably, yeah. The new immigrants, they've definitely made things tougher on those systems, but we got to remember, they're complex problems. They've been around for a while, and they need solutions that address all those different sides of the issue.
It's kind of weird, right? The video said that recent immigrants are actually the ones having the toughest time getting healthcare. You'd think a country that's known for being welcoming to immigrants would have, systems in place to make sure they can get the healthcare they need.
It's complicated. Lots of reasons for that. Language barriers, different cultures, and just not knowing how the Canadian healthcare system works. Those can all play a role. Plus, newcomers, they might face discrimination or bias, which makes it even harder for them to, figure out the system and get the care they need.
Yeah, that's a good point. It shows how important it is to go beyond just, welcoming people with open arms. You have to actually work to create a society where everyone feels like they belong. That means tackling those systemic barriers, providing services that are sensitive to different cultures, and just promoting understanding and acceptance, across all those different communities.
Exactly. It's not just about numbers, about how many people from different backgrounds we have. It's about creating a place where everyone feels like they belong and making sure everyone has a fair shot at a good life.
This has been a really eye-opening conversation. We've talked about why Canada made this U-turn on immigration, the challenges of having a fast-growing population, and, the need for solutions that look at the whole picture and plan for the future.
And we've only just started. There's still so much more to talk about, like how this will affect the economy, how it will change Canadian society in the long run, and what it means for Canada's image in the world.
We've got a lot more to cover, so we'll be back with the final part of our deep dive into Canada's immigration policy shift. Stick with us. It's like Canada's situation is kind of a mini version of what's happening around the world with immigration, right? So many countries are trying to figure out this whole thing, how to, keep the economy going, but also keep things harmonious in society. And all this while, the population's growing.
Yeah, it's a global issue for sure. And we're seeing all sorts of different approaches. Some countries they're tightening up, getting stricter. Others are trying new things, focusing on how to integrate people better and make things sustainable in the long run.
So where does Canada fit into all of this? What's the big picture here? What does this U-turn mean for Canada's future?
It's hard to say for sure, but this decision, it's going to have ripple effects. We talked about the economic impact, right?
Yeah.
But we got to think about the social and cultural side of things too.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. So Canada, right. It's always been proud of being multicultural, being open to the world. But if they keep cutting back on immigration, well, it could become a more inward-looking place. Less diverse,
That would be a big change for how Canada sees itself, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And it makes you think, right, can Canada still attract those talented people from around the world? Can it
Yeah.
still compete on the global stage? Can it still be a leader in diversity and inclusion?
It also makes me wonder, like, what are people who are thinking about immigrating to Canada, what are they thinking now? If they think Canada's not as welcoming, maybe they'll just go somewhere else, right?
It's possible.
Yeah.
And it's not just about how it looks. It's about having policies that actually help newcomers and make them feel like they're valued.
So it's more than just saying welcome. It's about creating a place where people from all over, from all different backgrounds, can actually build a good life.
Exactly. It takes, a vision for the future, a commitment to building a society that's both inclusive and successful.
I keep thinking, what if instead of, slamming on the brakes with immigration, what if Canada had, gone all in on other solutions? What if they focused on, building more infrastructure, making the housing market work better, and strengthening those social safety nets?
Those are all good points. It shows how we need a bigger, more complete approach to managing population growth, right? It's not just about controlling the numbers. It's about making sure everyone has what they need to succeed, no matter where they came from.
And that might mean making some tough choices, right? Like maybe higher taxes or changing those zoning laws or shifting how the government spends money.
Yeah, for sure. But these are conversations we gotta have. If we want a future where everyone can do well, we can't avoid the hard stuff.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this whole immigration U-turn, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the big takeaway is immigration. It's a complex issue. There's no easy answers. It's about finding that balance, the balance between what the economy needs, what keeps society together, and the well-being of all Canadians. And it takes, smart planning, strategic investment, and a real commitment to making a society where everyone has a chance to succeed.
Well said. And for everyone listening, I'll leave you with this thought. What kind of Canada do we want to build? For ourselves, for the generations coming after us. A country that's open, diverse, and welcoming, or one that turns inward and kind of, shies away from its role in the world. The choices we make now, those are the choices that will shape the Canada of tomorrow. So stay informed, join the conversation, and make your voice heard. Until next time, keep diving deep.